you can try to kind of shift and mold yourself to be more like someone else. But in the end, an authentic leader is really what people are looking for.
Welcome to the Let Me Save You 25 Years podcast. I am Shawn David Nelson, sometimes known as the Love Sack Guy. Thanks so much for listening. I'm only trying to deliver you the smartest people on earth and have really unique conversations with them because I'm not a media person. I'm not an interviewer. I'm a CEO. They're often CEOs, creators, founders, whatever, people doing big things. And I think you're going to love today's episode. Really appreciate you if you would give it a 5-star review. I don't take any money or anything like that for this. Any ad you hear just for the platform that I'm on. But just trying to be useful to you. So here we go. Today's Shawnism, read. This is something that I have to credit much of any success I've had to this one Shawnism. I think I was too cocky in the beginning to go seek out mentors. Honestly, like I should have done that more. I should still do it today. I'm trying to get a little better about asking for advice and seeking out mentors in my life. But I made books my mentor, and I tried to read them all from the time I was, I guess an adult. Starting in college, I always try to do all the readings. A lot of kids like to skip through and just kind of do the cliff notes. It's like, what's the point of going to school if you're not going to read? What's the point of even bothering with an education if you're not going to try and get educated? And thankfully that stuck. As I got into business, there were a lot of books that really shaped my leadership and helped me make good decisions because I was reading them actively as I traveled around, as I was working. We're reading all the seams and cracks. I remember so vividly one time I just finished this really cool book and I went to share it with my business partner. This is later, kind of halfway through Lovesack's tenure. And she was older than me. I mean, by decades. She was a well-seasoned executive that I had hired to be, and help drive the company. And I was excited. I went into her office and said, "Oh my gosh, you've got to read this book. I just finished it." She kind of blew me off and was like, Shawn, she's like, at your age, you're still acquiring knowledge and information. She's like, I'm at this stage where I'm trying to impart it. And I think like that moment lost me more respect for her than almost any one of our interactions ever that would follow. And ultimately that relationship didn't last. Read. Never be too old, too good, too smart. There's just so much to be gained. I hope I'm reading till I'm 90, if I can still see. Today's guest is a fellow reader, a fellow student of the world, a CEO of one of the biggest retail chains in America. We're going to talk about her philosophy when it comes to partnering with others and building collabs at the highest level. It's pretty cool. Some of the biggest celebrities in the world. We're going to talk about the importance of not just extending your reach, but targeting where you reach when it comes to your career, how patience is the key, how to play the old game of celebrity endorsement in brand new ways, the value of curiosity, how this is a skill that can be cultivated. The one business book that she thinks is overrated, hot take, purpose-led brands perform better. Go deep into purpose, how that's sought out, instilled in an organization and why it's so effective. And you're finally going to find out how she made PacSun the perfect intersection between fashion and culture. CEO of PacSun, Brieane. You're going to love this combo. Today, we have the powerhouse behind a major national brand in the house. She started at PacSun nearly 2 decades ago and didn't just climb the ladder there. She redesigned this company. She's now the first female CEO in that brand's history, leading one of the most iconic youth culture retailers in America. And she's doing it by actually listening to the next generation instead of just pretending to understand them. She's blended fashion with music, creators, cultural icons like Paris Hilton, Kendall and Kylie Jenner, and more. Turning PacSun from a mall brand into a movement, she is proof that if you stay curious, stay bold, stay close to your customer, and you don't just survive retail, you can reinvent it. Please welcome to the show, CEO of PacSun, Brieane Olson.
Thanks so much for having me. It's really fun to be here.
Heck yeah. All right. So, Brieane, when you, without even thinking too hard, when you heard our Shawnism for the week, read, first thing that came to mind for you.
Curiosity.
All right. Tell me more.
Yeah, I think, the value that I think about the most, in particular when it comes to hiring people, and when I think about how I can advance even my own learning, is staying constantly curious. And reading is a huge part of that. And so the book I'm reading now is Ethan Mollick's Co-Intelligence. And I think it's applicable to everyone because it's really about the pairing of AI and human capital. And
Mm.
irrespective of that, it also goes deeper into the power of co-creation and collaboration, all things that I really believe so deeply in. So it's a great, very short read. So it's good for people who also aren't avid readers. And I couldn't recommend it enough.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. You know, we often hear about curiosity. It's the first thing that came to mind for you. Is that just a natural feature of your personality or your persona, or how does one get more curious? How is that cultivated, do you think?
Yeah, I think for me, I was raised by two parents that were school teachers. And so curiosity's always been something really important. I think, the number one way to spark curiosity in yourself is to get really deep on things you already care about. So for me, that's the arts. I love fashion, museums. If you go deep on something that you love, then I feel like it sparks more curiosity and you're more apt to learn. I think where curiosity sometimes is dampened is when you're trying to learn about something that you really have little interest in. And so I think, continuing to surround yourself with, inputs on things or areas or industries or sectors that you're super interested in can help kind of create a through line for curiosity in general.
I see. So I think what you're saying is just go deep on something that you find interesting, and it will drag you into other realms that you can find use from. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think, that's why I chose this path in the fashion industry. I really loved clothing and apparel
Mm.
growing up. And, you try to find meaning and purpose behind that because it feels like something that's very much on the surface. But if you get deeper and it's about self expression and identity and how people present themselves, then suddenly it's a type of art form and it's really interesting, right? And so I'm sure in kind of your journey, you feel similar.
Oh yeah. I, I, I'm not crazy passionate about couches or furniture even, and by the way, there are people who are super into furniture design, and I don't mean to sound, I don't know, disengaged, but I don't think of Lovesac as a furniture company actually, right? I think of us as a reinventor of products and things that are rife for reinventing in the design for life way. And so this whole I've become super enthralled with this tangent, I guess, this idea that things can be built to last a lifetime, designed to evolve. Why aren't they like that? Planned obsolescence, this whole rabbit hole that I could, talk on for hours and probably bore everybody here. But of course, that leads me back to my day job, which is making the best couches that can hopefully not just drive my company to scale and implant our brand into millions of homes, but more importantly for me, the movement of starting to change people's minds about the stuff they buy. Like I think that if you become familiar with our products and like what we believe, my hope is that you start thinking differently about all the stuff you buy, because you realize through this conduit of a couch or sack or whatever that holy crap, stuff can last for decades. Why doesn't the rest of the stuff in my life? And what's cool, I think, about talking to you is that you're kind of at the tip of the spear in an industry that is can be the poster child for the opposite. New season, new collection, newness, where I'm trying to drive demand for sameness. And it's not a criticism. I'm curious to hear you square that up, and because you're like you said, you're passionate about fashion, especially kind of the drivers underneath it. So as you think of it in the context that I just threw at you, how do you, what do you have to say for fashion in that realm?
Yeah, so I think what's unique about what PacSun is doing and really what my focus has been over the last 3 years in my leadership is really becoming a purpose-led organization. And, I think inspiring the next generation of youth is really what we're here to do. And that takes on and might sound like a really big responsibility. Like, you're running a couch sack brand, but you're encouraging people to live more sustainable lives. And I think we're trying to inspire the next generation of youth by creating community at the intersection of sport, music, fashion, and art. And those are parts of what the youth, feel is a big driver in terms of their identity. And, meeting the customer where they are and continuing to push on, how do teens best express themselves. And so, whether that's through a Formula One partnership, a very special, unique partnership with UFC, or the Metropolitan Museum of Art, there's a whole range of ways that we're able to co create alongside different artists, brand partners, voices, and work that we've done with Paris Hilton to shine a light on ADHD as a superpower, and work that we've done with Selena Gomez to highlight the real need to put a focus on mental health and the youth mental health crisis, and how can we be helpful in not only creating those conversations but also creating ways to give back in meaningful ways to the community. And so I think that depth in which we've been able to take the approach to what on the surface could be clothing and footwear and accessories, and
Mm-hmm.
really create meaning behind it and create community behind it, I think is something that's very inspiring to me and something I'm very proud of.
Yeah, I love that. I want to understand better how that comes to life. So, in the real world, right? Like people could listen to a business executive say these things about purpose and about meaning, and it's like, hey, man, you know, sell more T-shirts. But when you talk about, for instance, Paris Hilton or Selena Gomez, ADHD, mental health, where does the customer experience that? Is it through social media primarily? Is it some other realm? And you know, bring that to life for me, and how that ties back to your business.
Yeah, what I think is unique is we're very thoughtful with how we approach partnerships. So, first, there has to be real value alignment. So, what was Paris, for example, trying to achieve? She wanted to, shine a light on ADHD as a superpower and make all people feel, differently about ADHD. And how could she leverage multiple platforms, but we didn't want to just amplify her message, because that could have been an easy, hey, we'll amplify the message. Let us put these on socials. We talked about how could we make it more personal? And so we launched product together, and we have product that celebrates ADHD as a superpower. And she did an
What does
in-store.
that look like? Sorry, make that real for me. Like, what
Super
is
cool.
product? Yeah. What is
It
product
was
that
actually it goes back to her album, which was the celebration of that, and so, it looks like band tees, and it's a way to help people express themselves and express things that are important to them without actually having to necessarily use the words, right? So you're creating this messaging. And, Paris, was very committed. She wanted to come to our Soho store. She met with every single customer that stood in line and did a personal meet and greet. There were thousands of customers, and she stayed for hours and hours. It was that important to her. And, that's where you start to feel the meaning and the connection. You're creating opportunities, you're creating experiential retail, you're connecting people that wouldn't have otherwise been connected. And perhaps, and I know it's lofty, you're helping to spread important messages, and you're helping to create, kind of the virality behind that. And so that's one example where it shows up, not only in socials, not only in the store, in messaging, the cross promotion, the cross amplification of the voices, and being able to deliver on. This was something really important to Paris, that she wanted to be able to reach the youth, and she wanted to, really partner with PacSun because we have access to a community that maybe isn't her core demographic. And then with Selena Gomez, we're in such admiration and awe of her, not just as a celebrity, but as a human being first and foremost. And she has a really clear value alignment in terms of the things that PacSun stands for and what we care about, and what she cares about, and the work she does with the Rare Foundation to give back. The Rare Impact Foundation is so admirable. And she has a way to facilitate and to help, amplify the great benefits that so many philanthropic groups are doing to reach the youth with mental health crisis and create more resources and more access, and importantly, to make it feel okay to talk about this. And PacSun recently did an in-depth Gen Z and Gen Alpha youth report with global data. And it was market research on Gen Z and Gen Alpha that, there's a lot of research out there, but we wanted something that, removed the surface level observations of these generations and really got under the covers. And one of the things that came out is, the thing that is most important to them in their lives is their mental health, even over their physical health or over academics, which, if you look back at millennials or generations prior, those other two would have really taken rank over. And so I think when you think about mental health, and how important it is to this generation and how comfortable they are talking about it, you
Mhm.
realize how important a partnership or collaboration with Selena Gomez and the Rare Impact Fund could be. But again, we didn't just want to stay on the surface. So we design seasonal collections that drop with her around denim, and we call it the Rare Denim Collection, that gives back to these different, organizations and foundations and philanthropies. And with every purchase, we're also enabling the customer to help give back in a meaningful way. And so I think it addresses a few things, but most importantly, the through line of how we actually bring purpose to life, not only through product, but through co creation, collaborations, and really working with our community to bring to life our four pillars.
Mm. Well, and I think it's a good example of tying back to where we started, being curious about this generation you're selling to, really going deep there and reading the research that you have done. I think a lot of people out there, for you, it comes second hand because it's what we do in our jobs. But I'm not sure everyone realizes how much money is spent by retail executives, product development brands, product development organizations, companies, service companies to um, engage in research to understand customers at a deep, deep level, and then cultivate their products and services to meet those needs in ways that the customer themselves may not even be aware of. And it's kind of like psychological judo. not to be crass about it, but it is. At the same time, I think that it can be noble in the sense that you described it, right? Where you play a role in this generation and in culture and in the conversation going on that can be both positive, uh, because you're bringing to light some of these things. You're developing products or programs that um, resonate with people that struggle with ADHD or uh, mental health in some way. So you're cultivating that conversation while you're selling t-shirts, and it's driving your business, providing jobs for that generation also, by the way. Like, my
Yeah,
kids love PacSun. I've been in there
me
many
too.
times. I'm very familiar with the vibe and the staff, and it's kind of this full circle. It's not just the man taking trying to extract wealth out of society necessarily. It can be co-generative, like, yeah, you're selling clothing, and it's, but by the way, they're going to buy it from somewhere. Why not participate in an environment that might just nudge them in a good direction, or somehow make them feel good? Again, they might not even have seen the Paris Hilton campaign. They might not have seen this. So, but the vibe there that permeates through even your people as they fold t-shirts and manage the store, right? It's all, and I think that's what I want to get to is, why does this work? You talk about all these things, and to, I think, a lot of people listening, it can sound really frou-frou. It can kind of sound like, I don't know, like disconnected from, like, sell more clothes or something. But to get down to brass tacks, why does this approach that you just sort of described work?
Yeah, so I'm a big believer that the future for brands is co-creation with your community, right? And you can do that in a lot of different ways. The first is social listening. So, we have this very unique opportunities as leaders today to have access to information and data and your consumers in ways that we did not have 10, 15, 20 years ago, right? But social listening is not enough. It's really taking it to that next step. And you just described a world where we're actually, creating commerce opportunities, new brand opportunities, revenue opportunities for our customers. And that's something that's really exciting to me. And that's why I'm really excited about agentic commerce and AI, because when we look at social selling and the work that we've done on TikTok, for example, and we started on TikTok in, gosh, 2019, 2020, we quickly amassed 2 million followers. I think it was 18 months. And we believed that TikTok would become more than an entertainment or dance platform. We knew it would be the next commerce platform. And so then in 21 and 22, we started building the back end infrastructure for what is now TikTok Shop today. And we built it directly with TikTok. But why am I excited about this? It's because there are kids in their bedrooms that have 5,000 followers who can go and grab a pair of PacSun jeans at the store, come home, earn affiliate commissions, and essentially run their own businesses for sharing their style or their personal style or their favorite pair of jeans or their favorite hoodie or their Formula One pole jacket or Metropolitan Museum of Art, t-shirt. And then they can allow that storytelling that they're creating to their group, whether it's 5,000 followers, 5 million followers, 50 million followers. And the algorithm allows them to essentially stand up a small business. So whether they aspire to have their own clothing brand, and that's a way to co-create with PacSun, if they aspire to be a stylist, a photographer, run their own business, or create a business out of the business that we're creating with this open creator platform, which we just launched on the PacSun Community Hub, which is available on the Apple Store, but also through TikTok Shop or YouTube Shopping. It's really exciting to see this new generation engaging with the brand in very new and compelling ways. And I think that concept of co-creation is so well illustrated in that example. We had, a girl in Nashville, Lila Biggs, who in 2023 on Black Friday, she had just gotten 5,000 followers. So she just became eligible on TikTok to be a part of the open creator platform. And she posted, a small, short, very authentic video in her bedroom. And quickly, she sold 11,000 pairs of jeans in just a matter of hours with
What?
5,000 followers because the algorithm can help you reach people outside of your community. And so then I think it's really exciting to see this peer to peer influence, to understand how selling is really evolving, where influence comes from, and the opportunities for people to actually monetize for themselves. And so I think, you think about kind of their virtual sellers, that's a whole community. And that's pretty exciting when you start to think about the trickle down effect and the future of commerce and what this might look like 3, 5, 10 years from now.
Yeah, that's amazing. That is really cool to hear about. Um, I feel like it's imperative for people to make the connection between your own curiosity about what's happening in the world, agentic commerce, AI, Gen Z, with the reality that you just described, because that doesn't just happen. It happens when a leader like you know, connects those dots and puts these systems into play through the organization so that, that reality that you just described can manifest. And that's, I think, again, back to the root of this conversation. I don't know that you would be able to do what you just described had you not been constantly taking in bits of knowledge and observations from many disparate sources. So, where do you go to get so versed on all of these trends and movements? And then, of course, be able to synthesize those into the strategies that you just described. Where do you go? Is it books? Is it scrolling? Is it conferences? Or all of the above? Like, tell us about kind of your, because read is the theme, but of course there's many forms of, let's call it, reading in quotes.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of forms of curiosity, and there's actually so much out there in terms of resources that it can almost become overwhelming of, how much time you could be spending on any given platform. I try to spend an over-indexed amount of time with where the consumer's spending their time. So, as crazy as this could sound, when TikTok was launching as a platform, this was also during the pandemic, but I was spending 3, 4, 5 hours a day trying to understand the algorithms, trying to understand how trends went viral, understanding kind of the behaviors that were happening there, just like you and I spend an outsized amount of time in our stores, right? Because we're trying to understand consumer behavior, and not only our stores, in malls, in other retailers stores, because it's an observation and it's being a participant of culture, but sometimes like a very quiet listener and an astute observer of what's happening in culture. And I think I'm very fortunate to have an incredible leadership team. The majority of my leadership team has been alongside me on this journey at PacSun for 15 plus years. And then I've got some, incredible leaders that have joined more recently from really great brands and organizations. And I think that depth of knowledge and creating a curious team is the next really important step in being a curious leader, because you've kind of got to instill this curiosity, this desire to innovate and explore and fail fast kind of within everyone so that everyone has a similar ecosystem. And there's a book going back to Read by Bill George called The True North, and it is a purpose book. And I've used that book many times throughout my career and more recently with my leadership team. And it really is a game changer in terms of understanding that your personal purpose and your professional purpose aren't necessarily separate. And if they're not separate, how can you find ways to intertwine them? And how can you make, you know, purpose really sticky so that it's not a mission statement, in a boardroom. How does it come to life in the field with your brand ambassadors, with your customers, with your community, with your entire ecosystem, the creators, the artists, the athletes that we're partnering with. And I think inspiring the next generation of youth is that through line at PacSun. And so that's, I think, something that has become very alive in our business for the last 3 years, and I would say was like, cultivating 10 years prior, but really not sticky.
It can be hard, when look, some business for Lovesac, we're very passionate about our purpose. I think it's a big reason why anyone joins our company, especially at the executive level, and because look, these people can build their career anywhere. Why would they want to come sell beanbags? Um, and but it took us. It's kind of like in this latest chapter that we even discovered that purpose. Look, we had different mission statements and purpose statements along the way, and I encourage that with anyone listening, whatever organization you're involved with. It doesn't have to be a business. It could be, your local, I don't know, church or scout troop or youth group or whatever. Why is it, Brieane, that purpose and sort of, let's call it finding that, stating that, building a culture to live up to it is so effective and important? Because you hear it kicked around a lot these days. You've read a lot about this, you preach on it. Why is it so critical and why does it work?
I mean, I think you're hearing it more and more, which in my mind is a good thing, right? Because hopefully in the future, there'll be more conscious organizations and there'll be more purpose led brands. And I think when you realize that purpose led brands can also perform better, you can start to get more stakeholders. Excited about what it means to lead with purpose. But ultimately, for me, leading with purpose is giving real meaning to why you wake up in the morning and you're excited about what you do, right? And I think it can't just stay at the surface. And if you can create that excitement and passion all the way through the organization, the performance will follow. And I think everybody needs to know how they're contributing to something bigger. I think it's really important. I think I've given so much thought to kind of what is corporate responsibility and how does it tie to social responsibility and like what onus are we taking for future generations as leaders of brands or corporations. And I think it really all ties through. And so having a mission statement saying, you're curating the best clothing, it's like, so what? It really has to go deeper. And I personally struggled a lot with that. I've got
Yeah.
a sister who's a cultural anthropologist who specializes in genocide. And, my mother was focused on early education for ESL students. And, I felt like I was surrounded my whole life with people who had very clear purpose. And here I was someone who loved fashion and loved kind of these industries. And you're trying to tie through like, how can you make the world a slightly better place? What contribution can you make? And I think there's a significant contribution we can all make in creating cultures that, are driven by purpose and that we can create a future better world for our youth. And so for me, that purpose kind of pivot was really important. I'm curious for you
Hmm.
how, maybe it wasn't the book, The True North, or it was an inspiring mentor or something else, but what really gave you your focus on the purpose that you have today for Lovesac?
I appreciate you asking. So I really like what you said, and I just want to reiterate for anyone listening how kind of simple and powerful the idea of people having passion to just get up in the morning and go do something versus having to survive, having to earn money to pay the rent, to feed my kids, to whatever. Either way, the latter is true. We all gotta like
Yeah.
survive. The alternative is to not survive. So we are driven to some degree, no matter what, with that survival instinct. But when you can get beyond just the survival instinct to something that you're not dragging yourself out of bed to go survive. You're excited to like make something happen, to make a difference in the world. Human beings broadly, I think, feel that way. And we could probably get esoteric with it, start getting anthropological and study that. There are many books, probably like The True North, that can explain that. But I'll just say it simply. Most humans want to make a difference, want to feel like they're making a difference. And so what a blessing it is to have an organization that can rally people around a purpose, because otherwise people need to find it somewhere else. And, so they volunteer for search and rescue, or they volunteer for the Red Cross, or they donate blood, or whatever, I don't know, whatever they do. And that's all good. But how cool is it to be, and I'm saying this for anyone listening, to be in a position where whatever organization you're involved with, if you bother, if you go looking for it, and sometimes it may take a decade to find the right one, to find the one that sticks, you can create an organization of purpose where many people can feel that drive that goes beyond just survival. And to me, that is a really cool aspect of leadership, and a better way to live your life, like a more interesting, deep, exciting way to live that many people, again, can participate in. So if you're in any kind of position of leadership, I advocate reading The True North, reading Conscious Capitalism. For me, it came from a combination of many books. So Simon Sinek, his famous video, Start With Why, the book that came from that TED Talk video. If you haven't seen that, just Google Simon Sinek and go back to the, mid 2000s, this grainy video where he explains, the best brands start with why, not what. And all these things I was reading, I put myself into, in my late 30s, I put myself into a graduate program at PacSun School of Design, and I ended up getting to teach there. But I went through this graduate program, and I was exposed to all this great reading. And I think of that period in my life, because I didn't need a degree. I wasn't looking for a job. You know what I mean? I just wanted to learn more. So that was always in me, I think. But what was cool about, it was hard because I had 4 kids. I was doing this at night, running a business that was still very formative. Lovesac was still majorly on the come up. But it was giving me this, it was like hiring a reading list. Like it just gave me this constant reading list. And back then it was cutting edge. And at the time, this is kind of a 2014, 15 range. There was tons happening in the purpose space, in the advocacy space, in the where business meets social movement space. And I was reading all this stuff, and I was thinking deeply about my own business, trying to make this big pivot that we were making to create the Lovesac that you would see today. And so in that soup of thinking and reading and pondering and strategizing is where I observed that the reason people like our stuff, so back to consumer research, the reason people like Lovesac stuff in the end, I mean, at first you just got to be, it's like dating. You just got to be attractive. Like you come into a Lovesac store, big giant beanbag, you flop down. It's like, whoa, okay, we've got your attention. That's like a good outfit. That's like a good hair day.
Yeah.
But you still got to go deeper if you want to take $1,000 from someone or $10,000 for a couch. And that's tricky because you're not going to find out that your $10,000 Lovesac sectional is going to last for decades until 5, 6, 7 years have passed. But I got to take your money up front. And so you got to operate on one level to just be fun and attractive. That's retail, and try and win people over. But meanwhile, when I looked on social media, our stuff does last forever. It exceeds people's expectations. It surprises them. They talk about this. You don't know you need a washable couch till you do. something happens and it's like, oh my gosh, what do other people do? They just sort of like wipe it up real good and hide it with a throw pillow, you know? And then we've won them over for life, and now we can generate new products, and it comes. And so that observation was the genesis. Our stuff kind of lasts forever, but the reason you can keep it forever is because it can evolve with you, right? You can change the arm style, the profile, the fabric, the covers. So it's by going deep and kind of being relentlessly introspective, observant, while taking in information from the outside, the best books, that the magic happens and you land on a purpose like ours. Inspire humankind to buy better stuff so they can buy less stuff.
Yeah.
And look, we don't intend to make all the best stuff. We'd love to. Life isn't long enough, but we intend to be a major player and build a reputation for having the best stuff. And that outcome then, that people want more of the best stuff and they start thinking differently about all the crap they buy. You know, if I spent my whole life doing that with good people, trying to make that happen, I think I'll be satisfied. I think I will have lived a good, happy, productive life that I'll be proud of. So, man, I just think of this whole movement as a massive blessing, and my little participation in it, or hopefully someday major contributions to it. We'll see. You know, like a lot has to go right for something to achieve this sort of legendary brand status that we're after, where we've really moved the needle in a massive way, where people are rejecting the phone in their pocket because it pisses them off, that it's being purposefully, you know, self-destructed for just to sell more phones. Like that's total bullcrap. I mean, it's BS. It sucks. And I think there's something there that Lovesac, strangely, Giant Beanbag Co. is tapping into. But that's going to take decades for us to even move that needle, but we're trying to. So I think I'm expressing this vocally because I just want anyone listening to kind of feel and understand how different it is to rally around something like that versus like, guys, we got to sell more couches. Like and by the way, that's true too. And I know it's true for you. Like we got to sell more jeans, we got to sell more t-shirts because we also have to survive. So both are true. And both are true for us at the personal level. It works at the macro level and the personal level. You and I both have to roll out of bed and go survive, keep our kids from coming off the rails while we're working busy jobs, and hopefully do better than that and stay passionate, help others be passionate so that getting out of bed ain't so hard.
I love that.
So, you know, we come full circle. I really appreciate you sharing, you know, your best reads. How about this? This is putting you on the spot. Because both of us have cooked in the soup of great reads to help inspire us. Can you think of, I don't know, a handful of other titles? Like, let's just be useful to people listening. Like, what are a few just that come to mind, titles, authors for you that have really, you know, pushed your thinking and formed your leadership?
Yeah, so I'd say anything by the late Virgil Abloh is just brilliant and
Mm,
genius. And the fact that he started as an architect, engineer, moved into kind of the entertainment space and music and translated it into fine art, and then ultimately landing as the creative director for Louis Vuitton. There's a lot out there from him. And
mm,
I just find it super, super inspiring. So Virgil, for sure, his latest piece on him is called Make It Ours. I highly recommend it. Truly amazing. The Culture Code by Daniel Coyle, also really great. The Creative Act, A Way of Being, another phenomenal book. And then a dear friend of mine just wrote The Purpose Pivot. Her name is Melissa Gonzalez. That's a really special book, especially in terms of kind of the moments in your life that are sometimes out of your control. She had a health issue that pivoted her into acknowledging a need for a different path. And I think it's really helpful for people to read to also create more empathetic and vulnerable leadership.
these are so good. I just wrote them all down. And as a tactical piece of, I don't know, advice for anyone listening, I whenever I get a tip from someone like Brieane, I'm writing it down. I usually am already uh,
Ordering it?
on Amazon or Audible. And by the way, some books I choose Audible because some certain types of books I think are great for listening for me. Others I buy the hard copies because I like real books, and I have I'll go further tactically. And in part of my morning mantra I'm always talking about on this podcast, I one of the lines in there is like, on planes, I only read books or write books because it's so easy to fall into, because we get tired, we want to watch
Yeah.
movies. And then look, I cave in and watch the occasional movie, but like I try to push myself to read real books. So I always have a real book in my bag, specifically on planes, because in my life I fly. Like maybe in your life listening, you do some different things, but get tactical and get disciplined about reading. Read. Don't lest all we can read someday is half sentences. I saw something yesterday that sadly the young generation is having real trouble with reading comprehension because so much of what they do read are just one line half liners on reels or Instagram posts, etc. So
So, Shawn, what are
anyway,
you reading right now? What's in your bag right now?
I'm actually in my bag. Okay, in my bag right now is Hollywood Babylon, which is just it's kind of a crazy backstory of Hollywood and its debauchery. And that's the thing, man. I don't, so I try to read every business, purpose, leadership kind of book that's out there. And you just gave us a handful. So thank you.
Of
I will
course.
own them all before the day is over. But I'm also, look, as a human on the earth, I play the piano. I uh, am into music. I enjoy literature. I try to push myself once a year to read like a piece of literature, a Hemingway or something like that. I also try to read novels at least once a year because it's not what I like. I'm not naturally drawn to that, but like they say that reading novels cultivates empathy in a way that obviously reading some business book does not. Even though, of course, I mostly read nonfiction kind of
Yeah.
stuff, like the stuff you shared. But I push myself to do that, and that's why I wanted to celebrate this Shawnism today and unpack that with you. What about you? Any other thoughts on taking in media, information, learning?
Yeah, I mean, I spend a lot of time on Discord and Reddit and
Mm,
YouTube, TikTok, all the meta platforms. Outside of kind of traditional reading, I think it's a contrast. The scrolling can become very brain draining, and so it's nice to balance it out. But I do have similar concerns to you about how little these younger generations are reading Gen Alpha in particular. And that's where it goes back to like, get them books that they care about topics they care about, right? So, if they're an athlete, get them books on sports. If they care about, the arts, find ways to create those pathways because otherwise, I think we will fall short of that.
that's awesome, and I think to bring it kind of full circle to where we meandered off to in the beginning, um, you spent some time articulating these pop culture celebrity collabs. And now that we've unpacked everything we've unpacked on this podcast so far, hopefully people can make the connection between you and your organization doing something that on the surface looks very kind of commerce driven. It's an old game. Like in fairness, celebrity endorsement is an old game. It's one of the oldest games. It goes back a century, and it's very powerful for reasons that are well documented, but also surprising. Like why does anyone care what toothpaste someone uses or whatever, right? But it works. But hopefully, my point is, listening to Brieane, you are able to connect the dots between how strategic one can be about playing, let's call it the old game, in new ways to not just sell more stuff, but to simultaneously sell more stuff and contribute to a meaningful conversation. So um, as you team up with some of these most incredible names in pop culture, Paris Hilton, Kendall Jenner, etc., what makes a celebrity partnership strategic versus just expensive marketing?
Well, PacSun can't do the expensive marketing because we're still too small versus some of those big guys out there. So that's off the table. But it
By the
wouldn't
way,
be a
hold on. For anyone listening, PacSun has how many locations?
305 and we're just nearing $1 billion in revenue. So we're certainly not small, but we're also not big like a Nike or, so I
No,
think
but I just want to put that in perspective because, the point being, you and I both run companies about that size.
yeah,
And in some rooms, it's like, holy crap, like $1 billion brand. In other rooms,
it feels really small.
we're dinky.
Yeah,
Like you watch the Super Bowl and the kind of money thrown around on those,
right.
right? So it's just perspective for people, right?
Yes.
But keep going.
Great. Love that clarity. I think even if we had unlimited, marketing budgets, which we don't, we would use the same value criteria in terms of who we partner with and why. One of my favorite partnerships was the one that we worked on with ASAP Rocky because he described this super nostalgic feeling for growing up and going to the mall and shopping at PacSun and how meaningful it was to him. And, now he's a brand ambassador for Chanel. And at the time, he was a brand ambassador for Gucci, but he wanted to be able to bring style and make it more democratic. And he wanted to be able to reach his fans that were on the younger side and who, perhaps had more restraints in terms of how much they could spend on something. And, he describes his kind of affection and love for PacSun and the mall. And it was so clear that like that was going to make a great partnership. And so when he showed up and disrupted our Soho store, on a Friday night by putting something on social media. In the next 15 minutes, I'm going to be performing at the PacSun store. I mean, we had barricades suddenly going up and we shut down Broadway. But, his whole idea was this is not invitation only. You didn't send out fancy invites. Bring all the kids in, the kids of New York, and let them flood the stores. And there wasn't a single person he didn't let in that night. And I mean, it was just magic. It's pure magic because it wasn't about selling product in that moment. It was about creating a memory for those kids and creating an experience that they would otherwise not have. And whether you were there or you weren't and you experienced it through the lens of watching from somewhere else, it created this affinity for what he was trying to do, which was create that intersection of fashion and culture and music, and he does it so seamlessly. And I think, you look at the album he just launched a couple of weeks ago, Don't Be Dumb, and the collaborations and the way he uses co-creation and the way he speaks to the youth, and it's super powerful. And so he's a great example where everything kind of lined up and it made a lot of sense. And there was a real reason for why this partnership was going to be authentic and why it would ultimately resonate with the customer. And he had a real why. And, you started this with like purpose, right? It's the why, not the what. And I think when it goes to our collaborations and what we do in the space, whether it be with Emma Chamberlain, or an athlete, it has to come down to the why. And if that why really matters, then the things that we do together will, create an outsized outreach to the community.
Yeah, and that's the part that I think people just need to have faith in. Like obviously, you and I and so many others are living examples of brands that are proving it works. And that's the point of one of my favorite books, Conscious Capitalism, right? Is that brands that are driven by purpose are not can't. It's not just that they can also be successful; it's that they're more successful.
Yes.
But you got to be able to have faith in that, and that's to some degree the point of this conversation is to inspire faith that if you can identify purpose, rally around purpose, lead with purpose, drive collabs around purpose, somehow the sales will follow. And so, what, by the way, would you tell a founder or a leader, whatever, that's thinking, if I can just land this celebrity or this collab or this endorsement, whatever, everything's going to change for me? On the other hand, like, how do you feel about that notion?
Yeah, I think that's tricky. I think there was a time and place where that might have been true, and it might have been 20 years ago, 30 years ago, or to your point, even longer ago. Now, I think, if there's a strong why and authentic connection, and you have a real reason for wanting that particular celebrity or artist or athlete to endorse your brand, then perhaps, but it's not about that one hit. I think it has to go further than that. It has to answer the why. It has to create continuity. And you, as a brand or founder, also don't want to rely on a singular voice to be the expression of your brand because the voice can change. There could be inherent risk to it. I mean, we talk a lot about brands and collaborations and celebrity partnerships, but a lot of them also backfire. And so it's a balance in terms of like, really trying to understand, is there a long-term partner for the brand, or is a multitude of voices healthier for your brand? And so I think first asking the why of like, why do you really want to partner with this particular celebrity or athlete or partner? And then understand that it meets their why. And then in the end, the best partnerships are where you're really being able to bring something to life that they otherwise can't do on their own. And so it's this amplification of resources, opportunities, communities that make it really special.
Well, just listening to you, it's clear why PacSun has done so well uh, during your tenure, and how, you know right the organization was to because you've been there a long time. You worked your way to this role, if that's fair. And I think that's
Yeah.
inspiring for people. It's not like me. I was just born into this. I don't know. I made a big beanbag, and so they got to all put up with me. But like in your case, you worked your way to this role. What piece of advice do you have for people that are not, founders, CEOs from the womb, but are out there inside of organizations and that have aspirations to grow and lead?
Yeah, I think first is patience because I think that that's waning and people's expectations have shifted that they want everything yesterday. And so I've been at PacSun almost 2 decades and, being patient and kind of having the like put me in coach anywhere mentality. I was willing to go to any area, oversee any division or category because I really have a spirit of wanting to help. And so it's more of like a surface minded leadership model. Maybe I would have preferred to do X, but you do Y because that's where they need you more. And being willing to constantly learn and understand that, like, understanding, back end operations and the warehouse is equally as important as the IT infrastructure and as important as the product design. And I think coming from a more product merchandising design background, accepting and really learning and spending time with the experts in these other areas makes for a much better leader because you're willing to be curious, you're willing to learn. You don't have to have all of the answers, but you're willing to kind of be a good listener. I think are really important, I would say, overlooked skill sets in eventually leading up to being a great CEO.
Well said. Thank you. Inspiring. All right, rapid fire. Don't think too hard. What's the last book you underlined like crazy?
Purpose pivot.
Okay. What is the book you wish you'd read 10 years earlier?
Co-intelligence.
What's a book that every leader should read?
The True North by Bill George.
Hot take. What's overrated? What's underrated in business reading?
I probably haven't read it if it's overrated. Um, The Tipping Point.
Which one?
Malcolm
No,
Gladwell's
I'm saying,
first
is
one.
that overrated or underrated?
I think it's overrated.
All right. Malcolm Gladwell. Hey, I like it. Yeah, that to me, Malcolm is like he's sold more books than all of us.
It sure has.
But yeah, there are better. Look, the spirit of this podcast, let me save you 25 years. What's one piece of advice you'd give to a younger Brieane out there that's listening, that you wish you had gotten, that might have saved you a chunk off your own 25-year journey?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. I think understanding that you are your best leader and being your true self is the way that you can truly shine through. I think early on in my career, I received a lot of probably inaccurate advice about, like, you need to be more aggressive, or you need to be more outspoken, or you're being too nice. And I think you can try to kind of shift and mold yourself to be more like someone else. But in the end, an authentic leader is really what people are looking for. So if you're soft spoken, that's okay. You can still be a CEO. If, you know, you're more empathetic, that also makes a great CEO. And so I think there's so many stereotypes out there that you're fighting up against. And in the end, if you recognize and you lean on your own strengths, as opposed to focusing on what those weaknesses or challenge areas might be, that really pulls you out in the best direction. And I wish I had taken that to heart earlier in my career. And that's certainly something I try to pass to my team members today.
That's great. Be yourself, lean into your strengths. And I think if we're constantly trying to develop, trying to read, trying to get whatever our version of that is, if you're not a big reader, find other ways. I think we can both be ourselves and develop, become more multifaceted, become more empathetic where we're not, become both quieter. In my case, I talk over people. I'm super energetic. And bolder, and have better judgment, right? So I think I really like that you shared that. Thank you. Well, look, you've got to follow Brieane, as I do, on Instagram at Brieane Olson. That's BRIEANEOLSON. Brieane Olson. Connect with her on LinkedIn. And the next time you're shopping at a mall, pop into PacSun and see what they're up to. It is so impressive how Brieane has shaped this brand and turned it into something that is even more meaningful than the PacSun I grew up with. And I did grow up with PacSun. So it's pretty cool to see what she's done there. She's really created this PS community hub. And tell us a little bit about that, Brieane, real quick.
Yeah, PS Community Hub is a new app that really enables social commerce and for there to be more focus and emphasis on the creator or the customer. And so, as we talked about those unique opportunities for our customers to be able to become, small business owners and to monetize and have more affiliate commissions, PacSun Hub is really a celebration of commerce, community, and really trying to bring everyone together and create more opportunities. So I encourage everybody to download it and play along.
I love that. Thank you so much to the retail radical, the Gen Z and Gen Alpha expert, the ever-evolving chief executive of PacSun herself, Brieane Olson.
Thank you.
And remember, if you're listening, titles do not make you sharp. Curiosity does. So stay humble, stay hungry, and read like your future depends on it, because it just might save you a chunk off your own 25-year journey.
My trip that I do once a year to take my friends away should not be the budget for your bike across America.
TikTok has become an aggregator for some of the dumbest human actions.
When I won that million, I was $2 million in debt, barely hanging